It's just gone 5:30. Welcome back. You're watching Squawk-Box's countdown to the Open here on CNBC Europe. I'm Guy Johnson. So, British Airways has blamed heightened security at UK airports for an 8% fall in operating profits, saying the measures costed £100 million. The airline also cut full-year revenue guidance as a result. Joining us now with analysis of the numbers is Paul O'Neill, Director of Aviation and Transport Services at Deloitte. Good morning to you, Paul.
Morning, Guy.
Clearly, the situation surrounding what happened with the terrorist incident was going to have some effect. Is this in the sort of the ballpark, do you think, that most people were anticipating?
I think we've got to take our hats off to Willie Walsh and the team for keeping it at this level. It could have been much, much worse. If we look at figures back in August, they had to cancel 1,280 flights. That's a lot of costs which you cannot recover. Except for your fuel costs, you fully finance those journeys. Your revenues have gone to zero. And somehow they've managed to keep the overall impact low. This is a major success.
What doesn't sound like it's turning out to be a major success is negotiations with unions. This is going to be a big problem, and we're hearing talk in the press of strikes this Christmas.
Well, first of all, on the strikes issue, which is the big point that you raise there are always talks about strikes for BA, and they have annual strikes, and it's part of business as usual. It doesn't mean it's not important, it doesn't mean that it's easy for management, but it's part of business as usual, so it's not something to get unduly worried about. But the pension fund is a big issue. It's a big issue across the region, it's a big issue across the UK, the whole of the economy, and it's a big issue for this company. But they don't stand alone with this issue. They're wrestling with it, they've made some progress, so there are further challenges to be addressed, but I think they're still doing a good job. The fight's not over. This issue trundles down the runway, it refuses to take off, but they are making progress, and they have some very smart people addressing it.
What do you think will be the kind of deal that we will see once it is actually finally completed? Clearly there's a lot of sparring taking place at this point, and they're both talking publicly about it. What kind of deal needs to be done?
The talking public bit is very interesting, because that's what makes the headlines. Okay? That's what makes people, you and me, want to have this discussion. But the smart people on both sides of the debate are really dealing with the knotty problems, and they're going to fix those. They're too smart to let the whole disaster unravel. So they're going to make sure that they come to some sort of agreement, but they've both got public audiences to address, and that's what they're doing.
You say the numbers have been quite good, which relative to what's happened, they probably are. But relative to how the industry seems to be booming at the moment, they seem to be slipping back, because it's quite good given the circumstances. But if you look at what's going on in other airlines across the world, the booming demand for flying and passenger numbers skyrocketing again, is this that good? Because relative to the industry, are they slipping? With strikes, with this security checks in London that we don't really have on the continent, is it starting to slip?
In their own region, so the key competitors or the key comparators would be Lufthansa and Air France, they're not doing badly. Against the US, Europe's looking good, and BA looks good in that family. Against Asia Pacific, Europe doesn't look so good, and BA doesn't look so good in that European family. So I think you've got to take a global perspective, because these are very global businesses.
But it's not that the key routes now in the world.
The Asia Pacific is a very interesting issue. I mean, I think it was yesterday, there was actually a failure to launch of the world's first long-haul low-cost carrier. So we're used to short-haul carriers, Ryanair, EasyJet and so on, but long-haul low-cost carriers, Oasis, in and out of London to Hong Kong. Due to launch, I think, yesterday, there's some technical problem over Russian airspace, but they will launch, okay? And this is the big issue. I think this is what you allude to. This is the big issue. If we're going to have long-haul competition for people like BA, that's where their big profits will come in. So they need to face that. Oasis, the long-haul low-cost carrier, are looking at prices of maybe a third to a half of what BA and what Cathay would offer on this sort of route.
And we do have low-cost, long-haul carriers. The person to invent an unfolding machine for humans will do pretty well.
I'm waiting for the beam me up Scotty solution to air travel.
I think we're all waiting for that one. Let's talk about the low-cost carriers, because I think you just raised that issue. I know Louisa has a question.
I'm still stuck on the beam me up Scotty air carriers. but Keith, I'm curious about whether or not you'll see a move between some of the no-frills carrier and some of the frills carriers, so to speak, whether they're moving closer together, especially with this quite aggressive move by Ryanair.
The Ryanair story is very interesting. And we just saw yesterday they submitted their a proposal of acquiring Aer Lingus to Brussels, and they're very keen that Brussels regulate the transaction rather than the Irish government, because the Irish government are against the transaction. Brussels take a fairly benevolent view on European consolidation, as they see extraction or removal of some of the overcapacity as being a step forward. Now, Will this transaction qualify for Brussels? Frankly, I doubt it. There are three main criteria, and I think this transaction fails on one of them. They're not big enough in 3 countries in Europe. The new company would not be big enough in 3 countries in Europe, and therefore I think Brussels will decline to regulate, in which case it's up to the Irish, and the Irish don't like the idea.
Yeah, and on top of that, you've also got those who still speculate that we could be looking at a lot more of the Asian carriers coming into the space of M&A activity, but merging with some of the European carriers as well. Do you think that's going to happen as well? I mean, Alitalia has been mentioned as being one of the ones that might be bought up by an Asian carrier. Whether or not that happens, who knows? But do you think that the Asians are moving closer to us again?
Well, the 2 big movers, or the 2 most dynamic parts of the Asian market, would be India and, of course, China. Now, India have recently merged their 2 national flag carriers into one company, and they've hugely opened their airspace for more competition. Probably a good thing. Do any of the Indian airlines have the appetite to acquire somebody in Europe? I suspect not yet. Now, if you look at China, 4 years ago, China had 7 large international airlines, and all owned by the government, now consolidated 3, China Eastern, China Southern, and Air China. They may well have the appetite for improving their European footprint through acquisition. Certainly there's a lot of aggression in growing the routes between China and Germany have been at the front of Europe in nurturing this sort of growth. Other countries in Europe have been slower and are now trying to play catch up to having that sort of European Asia or European China coverage. Whether the Chinese are ready for European acquisition or not, I'm not confident to say that they are, but I will certainly wouldn't put it out of the question, and it could be a very interesting play. Would Alitalia be at the top of that list? I don't know, difficult one. Alitalia is a special case.
Paul, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Great to see
you.
Great to talk through what's happening within the sector. Paul O'Neill, Director of Aviation and Transport Services at Deloitte. Right, we're going to stay with the earnings theme this morning.